Atheism and theism. If you're struggling with both of these ideas inside of you and you're searching for the truth about this world, you are in the right place. I invite you to search with me as I share with you my experience of discovering the truth behind atheism and theism. Dr. Subodh Pandit helped me along my search, and I'm sure sharing my journey with you will help you along your search. You see, when you have a controversy, there are two sides to an argument. But the PAN process actually has four sides. The PAN process is a fair way to handle controversial ideas. I have examined arguments to support atheism and arguments atheists have against theism. I have also examined arguments to support theism and arguments theists have against atheism. At the end of it all, we weigh the evidence for every argument and we go where the evidence leads. And here are the major arguments atheists have against theism. Number one is the lack of empirical evidence. It is true, we cannot see or touch or hear or feel God. Some people say so, but not everyone can be invited into that experience. This issue bothered me a lot because I reasoned if God wanted to show that he exists, all he has to do is to appear. Well, until I realized that empirical evidence is not the only type of evidence required to prove that something exists. There are many things we entirely or personally do not have empirical evidence for, but we know exist. Sometimes it's because we know how they affect things around them. Sometimes it's because we believe what other people have told us, other people who may have done the research. From things as big as dark matter to things as small as quarks, there are many things that we know exist, but we have no direct empirical evidence for. A funny example is that if you think about your favorite Marvel characters, Superman, Spider-Man, Iron Man, your thoughts have no empirical evidence. Another important note is that the universe is so large that there is a very high possibility that anything could exist that we have no empirical evidence for, even God. The universe is so large. In light of the grandeur of the universe, it is impossible for us to say that there is no God. Argument number two, a lack of design. It is true that there are many areas that exhibit a lot of random behavior. But the question I had was, is there any evidence for design? I learned that evidence for design is more important than the lack of design. When I looked for evidence to design, I was amazed. One good example is that the DNA has incredible design. It is like a supercomputer program that runs you and me. And every living thing you know has DNA. Think about the beautiful stars, the galaxies, the clusters, the superclusters. They cannot exist unless there's a delicate balance of laws and energy. A lot of this is evidence for design. We could talk about so many different things, the cell, the nucleus, cytoplasm, things like that. Design is all around us, from insects to birds to plants, anything. A lot of design is around us. The third argument I looked at was the presence of evil, pain, and suffering. And this is one of the strongest arguments against the existence of God. Here are the arguments. Either he, God, is not good, or else he is not almighty, says Epicurus. Is he, God, willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is impotent. Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Whence then is evil? And Stendhal says, God's only excuse is that he doesn't exist. But is this evidence enough to show that God doesn't exist? And let's examine this. Well, interestingly, pain is a universal issue. Both atheists and theists struggle through it, yet they come to different conclusions. Well, this should tell us that the proof or disproof for the existence of God actually goes beyond this argument. This argument also looks at supernatural qualities of God. And if you're looking at the qualities of something, the changes in the qualities of a person, for instance, only demand an explanation. They do not really mean that that person is non-existent. In other words, we're already assuming that God is existing. Before we can use these qualities, we first need to prove that God exists. And then we need to prove that he is almighty and good. And this is where the difference between an atheist and a theist is. Another important note is that even though pain is universal, yet happiness, joy, is also universal. And could this point to the existence of a good and almighty God? Argument number 4. Creation is not scientific. Creation cannot be replicated in the laboratory. It is understood as a miracle. This bothered me too. I thought maybe science has a better answer to how it came to be. I asked science, where do we come from? And I was told about a singularity, a point where all the laws of physics break down. I thought to myself, maybe science is not so far from the idea that our existence is indeed unscientific, or rather miraculous. Mathematically or scientifically speaking, we must have come from something. I'm not really able to believe, as many scientists do, that we came from nothing. To be nothing producing something is unscientific. And so it's hard to really throw away the idea of creation. The fifth argument is, who made God? You see, if you try to answer this question that maybe God had a beginning, and who made that beginning that made God? And who made that other beginning that made the other beginning that made the other source or made the other? And it ends up being an endless recursion, a question that has no answer. But we need to ask ourselves a better question. Even if we should throw this question to science and we ask who made singularity, if you say nothing, it does not really make scientific or logical sense. It's not really possible that something could come out of nothing. If you say something, then the question is, where did that something come from? Where did that other something come from? We realize the problem here is the question. We have asked the wrong question. We can ask ourselves a better question. And that question is the prime reality question. What is that thing or entity from which everything else comes? It is the ultimate explanation of our universe. It is uncaused. It is self-existent. It is unexplained. And we've looked at this. This question has only two answers. Either it is an intelligent being that has access to time, matter, energy, and space, or nothing. Well, you take the answer that makes the most sense to you. Another argument is, has science shown that God is dispensable? Let's look at this. Neil deGrasse says most of the things that were mysterious were attributed to gods, but now they are explained by science. And even though the knowledge of our universe is only 5% of the many unknown things that we know today exist, we know that science will soon have a scientific explanation for them. I battled with this argument. I believed it until I learned that scientific explanations to what we know are actually so mind-boggling that they are evidence for things that are supernatural. For instance, think of the energy locked up in a bolt of lightning. Think, okay, think of the energy in just a grain of salt. Or just try to fathom the grandeur of the universe. Or just the complexity of the tiny human cell. All of that is mind-boggling. Well, both Neil deGrasse and Einstein agree that the more knowledge we have, the more mysteries of the universe increase. That is why research never ends. I came to learn that science does not have all the answers. Actually, science is the process of digging up all the true answers, and this process is extremely valuable when done correctly. It is not hard to see that science cannot explain everything. Science is based on what can be observed, but many things are beyond science. For instance, morals and ethics, which are actually very important in science. Metaphysical issues go beyond science. That's why they're called metaphysical anyway. Why is it that our minds can comprehend metaphysical issues? Where do we come from? What's our purpose here? Then the idea that everything comes from material is also incomplete when it comes to the tremendous design and knowledge that we see in nature. Well, okay, just imagine wood doesn't really give birth to a table or a house over millions of years. It just doesn't. I thought to myself also, science makes more sense than the religious issues. Science is more consistent and it seems to have more facts than we see in metaphysical issues. Until I learned that science is a process of learning and discovery, and science requires an open mind and a variety of ideas and hypotheses. And we have to examine this to get to the truth of the matter. It dawned on me that this same principle is required in understanding and solving metaphysical issues. One is actually not against the other. When properly studied, science and metaphysical issues actually are harmonious. We could go into so many other things where we show that science is still in the process of discovery. These are some of the areas that require more research in the widely accepted Big Bang model. When we look at it, there are many questions that we still have to answer. Why is there smoothness and flatness? Why is there how could we have come from a singularity? Why is there abundance of elements? All of these are just areas that require more research. Has science shown that God is dispensable? Well, the answer is no. The more science we know, the more we find amazing evidence of design and information that points to a super intellect. The more science we know, the more mysteries we uncover, the more we need to research. Science is wonderful as it is. Unfortunately, science is not enough to answer the ethical questions or the moral questions or the metaphysical realities that you and I experience. And the correct scientific method of inquiry is the same method of inquiry required when tackling metaphysical issues. Thus, science doesn't show that God is dispensable, rather, science in many cases leads to the idea of a God. How about the religious diversity? Everybody claiming to be right in their different religions. I believe that everybody has a right to choose what they want to believe. But do not throw the baby out with the bathwater. A careful examination of the issues in the religious diversity will actually help to discover what is true and what is not. It requires an open mind and a willingness to stick to the evidence for the truth. And this is what we're going to do. How about the fact that so much persecution and injustice has been done in the name of religion? This issue cannot be refuted. It is a real and valid issue. It demands explanation. It might be helpful also to note that religion has actually contributed a lot of good things too. One of them is actually science. Now, here are the arguments. In my experience, the arguments come from a true and honest heart of inquiry. That was my heart. That could be your heart. Nevertheless, after we've looked into them, I discovered that there is no sufficient evidence to refute the existence of God. You want to see more facts about this? Stay tuned.